Hello YouTube, this is Obamamaniac with you once again. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard of the 7 deadly sins: greed, lust, sloth, wrath, etc. Mahatma Gandhi developed something similar to that called the 7 deadly social sins, which are a list of traits and flaws which he believed are the most spiritually and morally perilous to humanity. Now, I'm bringing this up because I'm noticing them being committed on a rather regular basis in our government, commerce, or popular culture, and indeed our society as a whole, and it's really becoming a serious problem. Now, it is in that spirit that I've decided to make a video series here on YouTube about Gandhi's 7 deadly social sins. First video in this series. This is the first video in this series. Is about worship without sacrifice. Now, there are some trends in the church today, and by the church I mean religious communities, Christian and otherwise, across America, that are very disturbing. Now, since the Christian tradition is the one I'm most familiar with, though, I will be talking in this video from that perspective. Now, the first and most obvious trend is fundamentalism. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, aren't the fundies the only true people of faith because they follow every aspect of their religion instead of picking and choosing? Well, so it may appear. Fundamentalists, while they are in some cases follow the letter of the law, they do so while rejecting the spirit of the law. Now let me give you 2 examples from the Bible. First one is Mark chapter 3, verse 1 through 6, and the second is from the same chapter. It's verse 23 through 28. Another time he went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger, and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Okay, next verse. One Sabbath Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along. They began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" He answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar, the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." In the first case, Jesus healed someone on the Sabbath, which is an activity which did not violate the letter or the spirit of Moses, law of Moses, but was prohibited by the laws of the Pharisees. In other words, the Pharisees took a law from the Old Testament which prohibits working on the Sabbath and distorted it to justify banning healing on the Sabbath. To put this in further perspective, some fundamentalist Christians and Jews believe that any sexual activity done for any other reason other than procreation is a sin. In other words, you can't masturbate, have oral or anal sex, or use birth control even if you're married, because I swear to you, I'm not making this up, they waste seed. In other words, spooges people. They got this warped idea from a misinterpretation of the Old Testament story of Onan. The story is very simple. Onan's brother, who was married, had apparently died before he could conceive a child. Apparently says God killed him because he was wicked in God's eyes, but doesn't say exactly what the guy did for God to kill him. So anyway. The point is, according to Jewish law and custom at the time, Onan was required to marry the widow of his dead brother and produce a child for her. He didn't want to do that, though, because he knew that if he conceived a child in that manner, that his child would be considered his deceased brother's child, and he would receive his brother's inheritance instead of him. So he spilled his seed on the ground, which was misinterpreted as meaning that he masturbated. Now, when you look at the entire act of Onan spilling his seed, as described in Genesis chapter 38, verse 7 through 10, you can clearly see that that is false. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of Jehovah, and Jehovah slew him. And Judah said unto Onan, Go into thy brother's wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother unto her, and raise up a seed to thy brother. And Onan knew that the seed would not be his. And it came to pass, when he went in unto his brother's wife, that he spilled it on the ground, lest he should give seed to his brother. In other words, he pulled out of her in order to avoid getting her pregnant. And the thing which he did was evil in the sight of Jehovah, and he slew him also. Now when you look at Leviticus chapter 15, verse 16 through 18, you see more evidence that the Bible does not consider spooked people. Well, anyway. And if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh water, and be unclean until the evening. And every garment and every skin is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water, and be unclean until the evening. The woman also with whom a man shall lie with seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water, and be unclean until the evening. Anyway, this makes me glad that there is a new covenant, because my water bill would be insane if I tried to meet that requirement. Back to Jesus. In the second example I gave of Jesus defying the Pharisees, he actually did break the letter of the law by harvesting grain. In other words, working on the Sabbath, but obeyed the Spirit by taking the food he and his disciples needed to survive. Now, as Jesus points out, the prophet David did something similar when he was hungry by eating the sacred bread that only priests are allowed to eat, and giving some to his companions. Because, as Jesus put it, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, by interpreting the law in such a narrow and literalist manner, the Pharisees have completely repudiated the spirit of the law which they claim to cherish. Jesus makes a similar point in Matthew chapter 23, verse 17 through 18. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the offering on it, he is obligated. What the fundamentalists and Pharisees before them have lost sight of in their excessive legalism is the spirit of God's love and mercy. They remember God's commandments to not kill, steal, worship false idols, which is important, but often forget God's commandments to help the poor and heal the sick and clothe the naked, which, last time I checked, is also important. They pray that God forgives them for their sins, but have no qualms about casting stones at others who have also sinned. They see the gold, but not the temple that sanctified it. They swear by the altar, but not by what is offered on it. They are blind, yet claim to see. That is the end of part 1 of the first episode in this series. Stay tuned for part 2, where I talk about the other extreme to fundamentalism called reductionism. And if there is time, the prosperity gospel. If not, then that will be part 3. Until next time, this is Obamamaniac.